At first, fans thought it was just another sweet stage moment. Just Taehyung casually wrapping his arm around Jin like he had done so many times before. But this time, something felt different. The way Taehyung looked at him, the quiet smile on Jin's face, and how neither of them seemed ready to let go, it instantly caught everyone's attention. Within minutes, clips of that moment spread everywhere, and fans couldn't stop asking the same question. Why does Taehyung always stay this close to Jin? Is it simply years of friendship, unbreakable trust built behind the scenes, or is there a deeper story no one truly understands? As more old moments started resurfacing, fans began noticing a pattern that made this bond feel even more emotional than anyone expected, and what they discovered left the entire fandom speechless. What began as a single moment under the stage lights quickly turned into one of the most discussed interactions fans had seen in a long time. The video kept replaying across social media, slowed down frame by frame, analyzed from every possible angle. Some focused on Taehyung's arm resting naturally around Jin's shoulders, almost as if that position had become second nature. Others couldn't stop watching Jin's expression, the quiet softness in his eyes that seemed impossible to fake. It was only a few seconds, yet for millions watching, it felt like there was an entire untold story hidden inside that one moment. As the clip continued spreading, longtime fans began doing what they always do when something feels different. They went back to old concerts, backstage footage, award shows, rehearsal videos, airport appearances, and behind-the-scenes moments most casual viewers would never notice. And what they found only made the questions grow louder. This wasn't the first time Taehyung had stayed unusually close to Jin. It wasn't the second either. In fact, the deeper fans searched, the more often the same pattern appeared. During exhausting world tours, when cameras were barely focused on them, Taehyung's attention somehow always drifted toward Jin. During chaotic backstage moments, when everyone was moving in different directions, Taehyung's eyes often seemed to search for only one person. In group interviews filled with laughter and noise, there were countless moments where Jin would say something small, almost impossible to hear, and Taehyung would react instantly, as if he understood every unspoken word before anyone else did. At first, many dismissed it as natural friendship. After all, years of living, training, struggling, and succeeding together can create bonds stronger than most people could ever imagine. But as more clips resurfaced, fans began noticing details that were harder to ignore. Tiny gestures, quick glances, protective movements, silent reactions that happened so naturally they seemed almost unconscious. One video from years ago suddenly gained attention again. In the middle of a crowded stage, with flashing lights and thousands of screaming fans, Jin slightly lost his balance while moving between positions. Before anyone else could react, Taehyung's hand was already there. Not dramatic, not obvious, just instinctive. Almost like his body moved before his mind had time to think. Most people watching live had missed it completely. But now, in slow motion, it looked different. It looked personal. Fans started piecing together dozens of moments like this, and each one added another layer to a relationship that had always existed in plain sight, but had somehow never been fully understood. There were quiet smiles shared during emotional speeches. There were comforting touches during stressful moments. There were times when one looked exhausted, and the other somehow always noticed first. What made fans even more emotional was how little of it seemed designed for attention. These weren't moments created for cameras. Many happened when cameras were focused somewhere else. Some were captured only by fan recordings from impossible angles. Others were discovered years later in forgotten clips nobody had paid attention to before. And that's what made this particular stage moment feel so different. Because for the first time, millions of people watching felt like they weren't just seeing an interaction. They were seeing a habit, a connection built quietly over years. Something so natural that neither of them seemed aware people were finally noticing. As the discussions grew bigger, emotional posts began flooding fan communities. Some shared stories about how watching their bond reminded them of friendships that survived impossible times. Others admitted that seeing such quiet loyalty between two people in such a chaotic world felt strangely comforting. But among all the emotional reactions, one question refused to disappear. Why did Taehyung always seem to gravitate toward Jin when the world wasn't looking? And as more unseen footage continued surfacing from different years, different stages, and different countries, fans started noticing one specific detail that changed everything they thought they knew about their connection, a detail so subtle that once you saw it, it became impossible to ignore. The deeper fans looked, the harder it became to call everything coincidence. What once seemed like isolated moments now started forming a pattern so consistent that even casual viewers began noticing it. Across different years, different tours, different countries, and completely different stages, the same behavior kept appearing. It did not matter whether the cameras were focused directly on them or capturing someone else entirely. Somehow, Taehyung always seemed to know where Jin was. At first, fans thought they were overanalyzing. That was common in any fandom. A smile could become a theory. A glance could become a headline. But this felt different. The evidence kept growing, and with every old clip that resurfaced, the emotional reactions became stronger. One particular performance changed everything. The stage was louder than usual. The lights were brighter, the choreography sharper, and the energy from the crowd almost impossible to control. Everyone was moving with absolute precision, every member focused on their positions. But during one transition, something happened so fast that almost nobody noticed it in real time. Jin paused. It was barely half a second. So small that if someone blinked, they would completely miss it. But in that exact same second, Taehyung turned. Not after. Not because someone pointed it out. Not because anyone else reacted. He turned at the exact moment Jin slowed down, as if he had felt it without even looking. As if some invisible connection had already warned him before anyone else realized something was different. When fans discovered that clip again years later, the internet exploded. Slow-motion edits started appearing everywhere. Millions of views. Thousands of emotional comments. Some people called it instinct. Others called it trust. But the majority of fans kept repeating the same phrase. People don't notice someone that quickly unless that person means something. And that was when the old interviews started resurfacing too. Fans went back to the earliest years, to moments before fame became overwhelming, before sold-out stadiums, before global recognition changed everything. And what they found was almost shocking. Even back then, when everything was uncertain and their future wasn't guaranteed, Taehyung's attention toward Jin was already there. In training footage, while everyone else laughed and focused on the group, Taehyung's eyes often drifted toward Jin during quiet moments. During early backstage videos, when exhaustion showed on everyone's faces, there were clips where Taehyung silently moved closer without saying anything, as if simply being nearby was enough. At award shows, in crowded rooms filled with celebrities, flashing cameras, and overwhelming noise, there were countless moments where Taehyung unconsciously stood near Jin, almost like it was the safest place in the room. Fans started realizing something emotional. This wasn't a new bond. This wasn't something that appeared because of fame, public attention, or fan reactions. This had been there from the beginning. Quiet, unspoken, constant. And maybe that was what hit fans the hardest. Because in an industry where almost everything changes, concepts, schedules, appearances, even personal routines, some connections somehow stay untouched. As emotional posts flooded social media, one fan comment began spreading faster than any edit or theory. Some people don't ask for comfort, they simply stand next to the person who already feels like home. That sentence alone made thousands of fans emotional. But just when everyone thought they had already seen the strongest proof of their connection, another unseen backstage clip began circulating online. A clip that had never received attention before. A clip recorded when nobody thought anything special was happening. And in those few silent seconds, fans noticed Jin doing something toward Taehyung that completely changed the story. As the newly discovered backstage footage spread across fan communities, curiosity turned into something much deeper. Millions of people who originally clicked out of simple curiosity suddenly found themselves emotionally invested in a story they never expected to question. The clip itself was short, almost painfully ordinary at first glance. No dramatic stage lights. No performances. No cameras directly focused on them. No obvious reason for anyone to pay attention. And maybe that was exactly why what happened next felt so real. The recording appeared to show one of those rare in-between moments, the kind that happens when performances end and the pressure briefly disappears. Staff members moved quickly in the background. Equipment was being carried across the floor. Other members were focused on their own conversations, their own routines, their own exhaustion. It looked like any normal backstage scene. Then fans noticed Taehyung. Unlike his usual energetic self, he looked quieter than normal. His shoulders seemed heavier, his expression more distant, as if the weight of endless schedules had finally started showing in ways cameras rarely captured. He wasn't saying anything. He wasn't drawing attention to himself. He simply stood there for a moment, almost disappearing into the chaos around him. And then Jin noticed. Not after someone pointed it out. Not after anyone called for attention. Not after a dramatic pause. He noticed instantly. That was the part fans couldn't stop talking about. In the middle of all the noise, movement, and pressure, Jin's focus shifted without hesitation. As if, no matter how crowded the room became, some part of him always knew when something was different about Taehyung. What happened next lasted only seconds, but it completely changed the conversation. Jin moved closer. Not in a way meant for cameras. Not for fan service. Not for attention. It was quiet. Natural. Almost invisible unless someone was truly watching. And then, with one small gesture that many fans completely missed the first time, Taehyung's expression changed. The heaviness in his face softened. The distant look disappeared. And for the first time in that clip, he smiled. Not the smile fans saw on stage. Not the practiced smile idols give in front of cameras. Something smaller. Something quieter. Something real. That single reaction sent fan communities into complete emotional chaos. Because suddenly, the story was no longer about Taehyung always looking after Jin. Now fans were seeing the opposite. They were seeing balance. They were seeing protection moving both ways. They were seeing two people who, over years of pressure, fame, exhaustion, and impossible expectations, had somehow become each other's silent source of comfort. The theories became even stronger. Edits comparing years of footage began appearing everywhere. Side-by-side clips from different tours, different eras, different hairstyles, different stages. Yet no matter how much time passed, one thing stayed the same. Whenever one of them looked tired, the other somehow noticed first. Whenever one looked lost in the noise, the other somehow moved closer. Whenever one seemed emotionally overwhelmed, the other somehow appeared without being called. Fans were no longer debating whether the bond existed. Now they were asking something much harder to answer. How deep does a connection have to be before it becomes instinct? And just when emotions across the fandom felt impossible to get stronger, an old rehearsal recording from years ago resurfaced online, a recording that had been ignored for nearly a decade. But this time, fans noticed one tiny detail in the corner of the frame. A detail that suggested this connection may have started far earlier than anyone had ever imagined.